This afternoon we're going to have some demonstrations on the point tool, which is a very handy little tool for quite a number of little details that you might need to encounter when you're turning. This one I have in my hand is actually a commercial version. I purchased it from Packard Tool Works. This is what we're going to make today. It's the same tool, only this is made with high-speed steel. And after we finish with the presentation, we'll go out and give you an opportunity to grind your own.
All right, the second tool that we're going to make today is a small round bar skew. Again, made out of the same high-speed steel bar stock that we use for the three-point tool. It's again a 10 millimeter by 200 millimeter bar of high-speed steel from Amazon. We'll show you how to grind this so that you get a nice 70-degree point typical angle on the skew. And then we'll also show you a little bit about how you can put a small skew like this to good use on the lathe. Talk a little bit about how you grind the bar stock that we've selected for this project to make the tools that we're going to demonstrate. Let's start out by talking about the high-speed steel bar stock that we've selected. This is 10 millimeter by 200 millimeter, a little bit less than 3/8 of an inch by a little bit less than 8 inches. Perfect length for this kind of tool that will allow you to seat it, enough of it into a tool handle and still have plenty of tool length left for pretty much any purpose for which you'd put these tools to use. We've selected 10 millimeter largely because it's a good size, particularly for the skew. Anything smaller than that for a round skew would really not work very well at all. And it also works very well for a point tool. So we're going to use the same size for both tools. With respect to how you align this on a grinder to allow you to get the facets on each of the tools that you need, 3 facets on a point tool, 2 facets on a skew, we need to come up with a mechanism to be able to reliably place it on the whatever platform system we're using. We'll talk about some different platform systems. If you watch a number of the YouTube videos, there are a number of different techniques people have used, running the gamut from freehand holding it, for example on a Sorby Pro Edge sharpener, to using a wooden triangle that you've cut that's equilateral triangle, to using nuts that have been, one video was a couple of nuts hot glued onto the bar stock. I think the easiest one for our purposes to use a coupling nut or barrel nut, called either one of those two. For 10 millimeter bar stock like we're using, a 12 millimeter coupling nut works particularly well. And in order to secure it on here, rather than hot glue it on, we simply drilled and tapped it to hold a 5/16 by 18 by 1/4 inch set screw. And you simply put it on the tool and on the bar stock and tighten this down. You have to determine what setback you want to use, and given all the variables that we're talking about here, we found that setting it back 1.5 inches from the end works particularly well for both of these tools. So we'll set it back 1.5 inches, and this is the resulting setup. This one's locked in at 1.5 inches back, and we'll be holding it on the tool rest to make the specific grinds, and you'll rotate it for the point tool. You'll rotate it 2 positions for the next grind, 2 more positions for the third grind, and then back to the original position for the initial grind, and you just keep rotating it back and forth. What we're going to do is put Sharpie dots on here so that you'll know which one you should be holding to, so you don't get confused as you're grinding it, because it'll screw up your grind if you select the wrong facet. We'll mark that as we go along. So this is the basic setup that we use for both tools. Both will be 10 millimeter bar stock, 12 millimeter coupling nut, set back 1.5 inches. So both tools will be set up exactly the same to begin with. The next phase of what we're talking about is what platform system do we use? there are a number of platform systems that are available, as we all know, for the grinders that most of us use. The most common one is the Wolverine system. So we're going to be using the Wolverine system platform in order to do these grinds, because that's the most typical. It's also quite possible to do it, and frankly much easier to do it on a little bit larger platform like the Stewart Batty platform, but that's not a particularly common platform, so we decided we'd go with this. The first thing we need to emphasize about whatever platform system you're using is it is critical to determine what angle you want to set the platform at in order to make the resulting grind that you want. We've determined that for the two tools that we're using in order to make the setup simple for the actual grinding that we're going to be doing in person after this video, that if we set the platform at 45 degrees, that gives us a good grind for both the point tool and the skew. So we're going to set it at 45 degrees. So the question becomes, how do you set it at 45 degrees? Any number of different techniques you can use to set a platform. You'll see I've got the Stewart Batty gauges. These are somewhat confusing to me, to be candid, because if I use the 45 degree setting on this device and adjust the platform, either this one or that one, it doesn't set the platform to a true 45 degrees, it sets it to something entirely different. If you set it to the 30 degree setting, oddly you get it almost at 45 degrees here. So a bit confusing as to how those platforms, those devices rather, set things up according to the resulting grind, not the angle at which the platform is set. So in order to make things really straightforward and simple for people, we want to make sure you know how the platform is set in relation to what we're going to call zero, which is the platform that your grinder is set on. The most reliable device to do that is one of these digital angle cubes. They give you a very reliable setting each time, as long as you zero it correctly. Here we're zeroing it to the platform, and once that says 0, that's 0.1, so we'll zero it, and then we'll set it on the platform, and we'll set the platform until we get it at exactly 45 degrees, 0. And the next critical thing is to set the distance that the edge of the platform is from the wheel. Because if I set that platform way back here, even though it's set at 45 degrees now, if I set it back here, I'm going to get a completely different grind. As you'll see, if I set it here, I'm going to get a completely different grind set way back here than if I set the platform right up against, or almost right up against, the wheel. So we set the platform at about a 1/16 of an inch away from the wheel. It's not hitting the wheel at all, but it's about a 1/16 of an inch away. And that way, using the 1.5 inch setback, it first contacts the wheel down here, which gives us plenty of space. By the time we finish grinding it, it's going to gradually move up the wheel as we grind, because we're grinding away some of these lower edges of steel each time we rotate it. And we want to make sure we've got enough room to go all the way up with the grind so that the edge of the coupling nut does not ever contact the wheel. So we want to make sure that 1.5 inches is nothing less than that, so we got plenty of room to play with as we're sharpening. And that's true for both of the tools that we're going to be making. So whatever platform you're using is going to determine what angle that you're going to have to set the platform at, and what setback you're going to use if it's a Wolverine, because that does have to have a setback. The Batty platform is designed completely differently than the Wolverine platform, because this platform is designed to always fit against the bottom of the mounting system, and it simply rotates in place without ever having to move the bottom in or out. So you won't have to worry about proximity of the platform to the wheel, because it never contacts the wheel. It stays in that one position, and you simply rotate it to whatever angle you want. With the Wolverine platform, because it will contact the wheel if you let it get too, if you let the base get too close, you have to set the angle of the platform first, and then after it's set to 45 degrees, then you move it about 1/16 of an inch away from the wheel, and then you're good to go. And you leave it that way for both tools. It will stay at 45 degrees, 1/16 of an inch away from the wheel for grinding both tools. Okay. All right, now we're going to be showing you how to grind the skew. Because this requires two facets ground at a specific angle so that we can end up with the typical 70-degree skew angle on the end of the grind once we're done, we need to mark our platform at 15 degrees on either side so that we'll be holding it for each side of the grind at 15 degrees, so the resulting compound angle will be 30 degrees off. So what we have done to facilitate that process is to make a little jig that we can put on the Wolverine platform here. We center it on the wheel and then just make a couple of quick marks on the platform. And these marks will be our guides for when we are going to hold the assembly onto the platform. So just in case you don't have a snazzy little jig to mark the 15-degree lines on here, you can make those lines very easily with something like this little gauge that most of us as wood turners already have. Simply set it at 15 degrees off of 90, that's really 75 degrees on here, and put the edge of it centered on the very center of the platform. Center it right there on the platform, and then simply mark your line 15 degrees, and then do the same thing to the other direction, 15 degrees the other way. Center it over here and mark your line so that you have, again, two nice 15-degree lines. So any device that you have that allows you to mark the platform like that, doesn't have to be a snazzy little simple gauge like that to do both at the same time, but any device like this, whether it's a digital caliper or a digital ruler, or any of those devices like this, they all work fine. We'll be holding it like this for each grind, and then flipping it over to the other side. Now, on this particular tool, unlike the point tool where we began the grind with the facet of the coupling nut that has the set screw on it pointing up, straight up, we don't want to do that here, because that would mean, since we're only turning it two facets, we'd be turning it on top of that nut, that set screw rather, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to begin this one with the coupling nut turned one position to the right. You can begin at one to the left if you want, doesn't really make any difference. So we'll begin at one to the right, and then we'll start to grind that face, and I'll mark so that we know which facets of the coupling nut we're using. Just put one dot up here, so we're using that one, and then when we come over to the other side, we'll be using this one, so that we don't get confused on which is which. So again, we'll be ground this way on this side, and then when we flip it over to the other side, we'll keep that side up and grind again, holding the nut right along this line, same as we're doing over on this side, holding it along that line, and we begin the grind that way. So let's get started. Then we'll flip it over to the second side and begin grinding the other side. see how the grind is beginning to form. I should mention, just very briefly, that we're using here a 180 grit wheel. It'll take, to grind this tool completely, it'll take about 25 minutes. Obviously, if you had a coarser grit wheel, such as an 80 grit wheel, it would take significantly less time.
What we're going to do is we're going to grind the three-sided point tool, and we're going to use the same coupler nut setup, but instead of using just two sides to make a skew, we're going to use three sides of this. Now, you know, we have to start with the first face with the set screw here, because we can't hold the tool flat if we set it on the set screw. So your first face is always going to be with the set screw up. So we're going to go ahead and put a mark on this face, and that's your first face. The second face, left or right, is going to be 2 over. So we want to go 120 degrees, and the same thing going in the other direction. So now we have equal faces and three sides. All right, the other thing that I do is that I put a little dot in the center of the top of the blank, just to keep an idea of where the grind is at any given time, because we set this table to 45 degrees. What we're trying to do is keep the distance of the point from going too far down. Otherwise, what you have is a very pointy tool, and a pointy tool is an aggressive tool, and it'll catch on you. So we want these faces to be fairly short. It's recommended that it be about 110% of the diameter, which is what we'll end up doing. So we'll start out, we'll lay it flat on the rest here, and we'll ease it in and grind, and then we'll move it to the next spot, ease it in and grind. We'll move it to the next spot, ease it in and grind. We'll try to keep each face equal as we move, checking to see if it's moving up to the center at an equal rate. All right, so one thing you have to be careful of as you go into the wheel is the wheel has a tendency to push it up, and you don't want it to do that. So be sure you're holding down on the platform. Okay. Now, if you look at the end of this, you'll see that it's starting to form a triangle, and you want to work that triangle to the center. So If you have trouble finding the center, that's why I usually put the dot right in the center. And that way you have a reference point as to where the center is. You always want to move at it at equal rates so that you have a point centered on the tool.
There we go.
Okay, so after you finish grinding, you should end up with a tool that looks very much like the one on top. As you can see, the arc at the bottom of the point is fairly short, and it's about the right distance, equaling about 110% of the diameter. Now the tool on the bottom was ground at 50 degrees instead of 45, and as you can see, the distance between the point and the arc at the bottom of it's quite long. That makes a very pointy tool. Now, you know, if you feel confident that you can get that point into a tight space, it might be something you want, but a tool like that is very aggressive and grabby and very likely to cause a catch. So you want to keep your tools fairly short and make sure that they're equal on each face. First we're going to do the planing cut, and what you do is you place the face on your work just like you were touching the bevel on a spindle gouge. You rotate until you start to get a cut. Now you always want to get the cut on the heel, not on the toe. And you bring it in and you move it along. So that's the first cut, is the planing cut. So the next cut we're going to do is a V cut. You want the flat face up. You put your tool on the tool rest. You bring your point in and your arc in and begin your V cut to depth. Tool on the tool rest, flat face up. Bring your point in, arc in, until you've created a V cut. Okay, so the next cut we're going to do is a bead, and we're going to use the V cuts that we already used. You can do this at any point, but we're going to use this. Now on the right hand side, you want your finger out and your finger to the side so that you can rotate the tool. And what you do is you go to the bottom of the bead, you start to move up and rotate to the side. On the other side, you put your hand on top, you go to the bottom of the bead, you start to rotate the tool, and you come around. On the side, up and around. And that's a bead. We're going to do a facing cut, and what you want to do is put your face against the face grain, bring it back, put your point in, make a little edge, push your tool in, arc it down to the center. Another handy use for the point tool is particularly when you're finishing the bottom of a bowl and you want to put your name on the bottom of it. You can use the point tool to create your little circle to put your name in. Again, you put the flat face up, tool on the tool rest, bring the tool in and create your circle. One of the other handy uses for this tool is that if you're trying to get a bevel, a correct angle on your foot to remount your bowl, and you're having trouble getting it with a bowl gouge or a spindle gouge, the point tool comes in handy because you can point the tip in, make a quick cut, and change the angle of your foot so that you get a good grip with your chuck. You can work in from the end, or you can come in very gently from the side, make a very sharp ledge around the foot to hold it steady. So that's another use of the point tool.
Next, we're going to do one of the cuts that you can do with this very small skew, which is a planing cut. Not typically a size skew you would use on a spindle piece quite this diameter, but just to show you what the tool can do. And it gives you a very nice smooth finish. We're going to demonstrate with this small round bar skew is a cut to allow you to make the dovetail recess in a mortise for a chuck when you're mounting a bowl blank. Used a parting tool to make a straight-sided mortise in here, and in order to make that dovetail cut you can use a number of tools. This one is particularly handy to use for this purpose because it's nice and small and can get in and sit exactly the right angle, a 70-degree angle that fits the typical dovetail jaw. So let's make this is the angle that you would present the tool to the mortise to give you that 70-degree cut on the inside of your mortise, so that you get the relief that you need for the dovetail profile on the jaw. A little quick relief cut here. Just that quickly, you have a nice dovetail recess in the mortise. You can also use this as a negative rake scraper to clean up the bottom of a mortise of this type. Doing it simply like this. Clean it up and give yourself a nice smooth bottom. Just that easily it's done.